Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening. It's Wednesday, August 26th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Parents anxious about their children returning to classrooms during the pandemic got some answers today. San Diego County public health officials laid out guidelines for when all schools will be allowed to reopen next week. As for the latest coronavirus numbers, the county reported 3 more deaths and 287 new cases. And we are still below that case rate of 100 per 100,000 threshold for reopening. KPBS health reporter Taryn Mento has the latest.
Schools in San Diego County are days away from getting the option to reopen. If the county's case rate continues to stay below the state's threshold, schools could be cleared for in-person learning as soon as next Tuesday.
We're doing everything that we can to try and facilitate and support a safe return to a learning environment.
Supervisor Nathan Fletcher says that includes testing for school personnel. He says tests are available for staff at existing county sites, but the county is launching specific locations just for education personnel, including those who work at private and charter schools.
There are strong recommendations in the California Department of Public Health requirement of testing of staff at school facilities. This is not just teachers, it is teachers and maintenance and bus drivers and administrative support staff.
But he says testing isn't recommended for students without symptoms, but parents still interested in testing should contact their pediatrician. Still, some districts may not reopen. San Diego Unified has said it'll begin online until other metrics improve. County Office of Education Superintendent Paul Gotthold says right now not all kids have internet access, but new county funding may finally help them get online.
It's going to help families to be able to get in front of, not have to go to the local library to use the resource to be available to their home. And so we're excited about the prospects. Even as early as next week, we will have thousands of families connected because of this new plan that we'll be able to provide.
He says once schools do reopen, individual classrooms, schools, or districts may be shut down for 2 weeks if too many people test positive.
5% of a classroom. So if you're talking about pods of kids in small groups, this could just mean one positive case, either students or staff. That classroom would automatically shut down for 14 days. If you're talking about an individual school, 5% again is the metric.
Still, Dr. Wooten says more guidance is coming, including for when businesses can reopen. The governor today said that's coming Friday. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
California is boosting its turnaround times for tests and lowering costs that are covered by public dollars. Governor Gavin Newsom says under a new contract with a Massachusetts company, each test will cost about $31 with results within 2 days.
This is exactly what the federal government should be doing. And had the federal government done this some time ago, you wouldn't see average cost of tests at $150 to $200, costing the taxpayers quite literally tens of billions of dollars.
The state currently averages about 100,000 tests per day, with results taking between 5 and 7 business days. Newsom says the multi-million-dollar contract with Perkin-Elmer will increase testing to 250,000 per day by March. State Senator Brian Jones has tested positive for coronavirus. He made the announcement late today on Twitter. Jones, a Republican from the 38th District, plans to take additional tests to rule out a possible false positive. San Diego County supervisors passed a $6.5 billion budget, its largest in history. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen says spending was boosted to deal with the health and economic consequences of the COVID pandemic.
For years, progressives have criticized the county for sitting on billions of dollars in reserves, while problems like homelessness and mental illness fester. The pandemic did what those activists couldn't. The county dipped into its reserves and federal CARES Act funding to pay for new or expanded services, including $24 million in rental assistance. Supervisor Greg Cox said he was also pleased with a new staff position that will monitor water quality in his South Bay district.
City of Imperial Beach and communities in South County have had to suffer with the ill effects of raw sewage and other materials coming across the border and coming out into our beaches. And I'm really glad to see that this is going to be an opportunity to have a daily testing to ensure good water quality for people to use the beaches down in South County.
A big driver of the overall budget increase was a $100 million boost in spending on testing, tracing, and treatment for COVID, as well as protective gear and other supplies for healthcare workers. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
A gym in University Heights that for months has defied orders from county health officials to close is now temporarily shutting its doors. Boulevard Fitness chose to remain open despite orders to close indoor activities in mid-June. In an email to members, the owner said he would temporarily close, citing financial problems. The gym was facing fines of up to $1,000 for each day it remained open. While San Diego County is no longer on the state's COVID-19 watch list, it is unclear when gyms will be allowed to reopen. San Diego County has refused to provide more detailed information about where COVID-19 outbreaks are occurring. As investigative reporter Claire Tregesser tells us, KPBS is joining Voice of San Diego in a public records lawsuit in the hopes of getting that information.
During news conferences, when county health officials talk about COVID-19 outbreaks, here's what they say.
8 outbreaks in businesses, 4 in restaurants/bars.
KPBS and other journalists have repeatedly asked for more information, and the county has repeatedly denied those requests. So we are joining Voice of San Diego in a public records lawsuit.
We keep seeing restaurant bars in the description of these outbreaks. Well, are those restaurant bars operating outside? Are we getting information through this that operating outside isn't working? Or is something else happening? Is it the kitchen staff? And what does that tell us about, what's going on?
Scott Lewis is the editor and CEO of Voice of San Diego.
That's a fundamental question to our activities as humans right now. Like that, if people found out that, in fact, it spreads really well in outdoor patios of restaurants, well, that's going to really influence my decision about whether to go to an outdoor restaurant.
Lewis says without the more detailed information, residents can't make informed decisions about the relative risk of engaging in activities like eating out. He adds that it is also an equity issue. If some neighborhoods are being hit harder by outbreaks than others, the public needs to know. Suzanne Marmion is KPBS's Director of News and Editorial Strategy.
If we have an outbreak that happens more than once in a particular location, the public depends on journalists to find out and report that out so that it gives an opportunity maybe for enforcement. It gives an opportunity to solve what may be a specific problem.
Instead of commenting, a San Diego County spokeswoman referred KPBS to an op-ed saying outbreak locations should not be public because it could make businesses fearful of reporting cases to health officials. However, this is not how the county has acted in the past. During the 2017 hepatitis A outbreak, they did reveal locations where people might have been exposed. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
Protests over the Wisconsin police shooting of a black man are now spilling over into sports. It comes after 2 people were killed and another badly hurt during a protest in Kenosha. As Whitney Wild reports, police made an arrest today.
Deadly gunfire rang out in Kenosha during a 3rd night of protests over the police shooting of Jacob Blake. The violence erupted despite pleas from his family for peace.
Please don't burn up property and cause havoc and tear your own homes down in my son's name. To react in that manner is just not acceptable. and it's not helping Jacob.
2 people died, a third was injured with serious but non-life-threatening injuries. Police say the shooter is a 17-year-old from Antioch, Illinois, and now faces a charge for first-degree intentional homicide.
Violence in the community is not acceptable. Violence to property, violence to people, absolutely unacceptable.
2 Kenosha Police Department officers remain on administrative leave as the state's Department of Justice investigates the shooting. According to Blake's family, he's now paralyzed from the waist down. Blake's family attorney insists he did not have a weapon. Wisconsin's governor declared a state of emergency and has called in hundreds of members of the National Guard to calm a community shaking with anger.
7 o'clock, the curfew will allow us to disperse whoever's gathered. Maybe there'll be no one, and I hope that's true, but disperse who's ever gathered in daylight. So it'll help us to be able to see better.
Whitney Wild, KPBS News.
NBA players are protesting Blake's shooting and racial injustice. All 3 of today's playoff games were postponed after the Milwaukee Bucks didn't take the floor for their game against the Orlando Magic. Several NBA stars, including the Lakers' LeBron James, have been demanding change. MLB players are also taking a stand. Tonight's Padres game at Petco Park against the Seattle Mariners was postponed after Mariners players agreed not to take the field. The families of 3 women who died in a bluff collapse in Encinitas last summer are pushing for change and suing for compensation. KPBS environment reporter Eric Anderson has details.
3 women were killed on an Encinitas beach last summer when a 30-foot wide rock slab slid off a coastal bluff and buried them. The wounds created that day are still raw for Curtis Clave, who lost his wife Annie in the incident.
It feels like yesterday, honestly. I was forcing myself to write Annie's eulogy, and I just could not commit because I could not accept the fact that this is actually a life we are all living as a family.
Clave is angry that so little has changed in the past year.
I've been focusing 100% of my time on my kids because they need it. They've lost their mom due to this horrific accident.
Clave regularly sees families camped near the dangerous bluffs on the narrow beach, and he wants that to change. He supports state legislation that allows communities to do more to manage erosion along coastal bluffs, including building controversial seawalls. Clave is also part of a lawsuit against the city and state that alleges the governments knew about the risk but did nothing. Attorney Deborah Chang says the families want to shine a spotlight on the issue.
The only thing that we have in this world, we can't bring them back, but we can put a spotlight on what happened, and we can seek justice and compensation for these tremendous losses that can't even be quantified at this time.
Chang says the bluffs remain a ticking time bomb, and she worries another collapse could kill more people who are just trying to enjoy the ocean on a narrow Encinitas beach. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
Encinitas city officials did not return calls seeking comment. You've seen all those fires across the state, and tonight local leaders and fire officials are urging we do everything we can here to stay on high alert, especially with this warm weather. Officials gathered today to not only give warning to be fire safe and make defensible space around homes, they also updated the media on state-of-the-art equipment in our area, saying our firefighters have what they need to do the job.
To continue to have a focus on being prepared, investing in our men and women of the San Diego Fire Rescue Department to give them the tools that they need.
Officials also showed off new equipment, including 8 additional fire engines built to fight fires in high-density areas, as well as a Firehawk helicopter capable of night flying and dropping 1,000 gallons of water at a time. Thousands of people in Northern California returned home after evacuation orders were lifted. An influx of aid helped firefighters gain more control over the massive fires, and the cooler weather has been a big help too. Lightning sparked dozens of fires last week, including 2 among the largest in California state history.
No big changes with our heat. Generally dry conditions are in our weather headlines with our night and morning low clouds and areas of fog. But we still have that cooling trend coming for the weekend. Signs of that beginning as early as Friday, and over the weekend into early next week, temperatures will be trending down, but not much moisture out there. Looking at the advisories for you, there are heat advisories up towards the Inland Empire, across the deserts. Of these excessive heat warnings continue into Thursday, so limit your time outdoors in the sunshine. Make sure you hydrate. Temperatures tonight around 67 in Oceanside, San Diego 71, El Cajon is at 70, Ramona 61, and Campo will dip down to 60 degrees. As we look at tomorrow's weather, no major changes. It's dry, and with dry conditions, the elevated fire danger. Really don't see much of any thunderstorm activity around, just too dry out there. Temperatures into the mid-80s, morning clouds giving way to some sunshine. Oceanside, San Diego's 83, but we're up at 100. El Cajon and Ramona, and we're up to 115 in Borrego Springs. Sizzling sunshine. Looking ahead, Friday, well, it stays dry and hot, but we are starting to see some subtle changes here along the coast. So as we look at our temperatures, really not much change on Friday, but we do see temperatures trending down some over the weekend. Still a little bit of humidity out there. We do notice the inland sections not as hot Friday, Saturday, and over the weekend we'll see some upper 80s. Checking out the mountains here, notice it's generally dry, hazy sun, but the temperatures do drop and we'll see some upper 70s. And checking on the deserts, another scorcher Thursday, but then over the weekend, notice temperatures do come down to more tolerable levels. And for KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Mark Mancuso.
The flu season typically begins in October, and health experts are worried how that will collide with the current coronavirus pandemic. KPBS health reporter Taryn Mento asks Kaiser's Permanente's Dr. Will Sang how the annual flu shot may help.
Dr. Sang, thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you for having me.
Flu season's coming up. We're in the middle of a pandemic. What is the first thing that the public needs to know?
Well, the public needs to know that the flu vaccine works. For the last several years, CDC has looked into the study and proven, without a shadow of doubt, that you can prevent hospitalizations up to 37%. And if you do get admitted, you reduce your chances of ending up in an intensive care unit by 82%.
I believe it's 40 to 60% efficacy based on year. That's, not really a convincing argument for people.
Yeah, I mean, we hear those numbers thrown around, but the key thing is if you look at the studies, and CDC has done this every year now, to look at the efficacy. That's why I said that if you have been vaccinated, you can reduce your chances of ending up in a hospital. But more importantly, even if you do come in for a flu-like infection, if you've been vaccinated, it drops your chances of ending up in the intensive care unit or even dying from the disease by up to 82%. On top of that, you can also prevent yourself from spreading it to someone who's older or younger, who are more vulnerable. And that's really what we want. Protect yourself, but to protect your family as well.
How are you actually going to spread that message that results in people actually coming in at a time when people are scared to come in?
I guess the best example is this. Not only do we believe in this, we walk the walk and we talk the talk, but we walk the walk. So all our physicians, all our staff physicians, every year we have about high 90% vaccination rate among all our staff physicians, up to 99.3 in several years, because we believe in it. We're not just talking about it, we follow that advice. The only exceptions I'll tell you is people who take extended leaves or if they have valid medical concerns that's documented.
That's your staff. What about rollout for the public? A lot of concern about actually coming in, even for urgent medical needs. We've seen those numbers are lower during the pandemic. How are we getting people to actually physically walk through a door for preventative care?
Great, perfect question. We've learned from this pandemic, we've learned that we can use technology wisely, keep the same quality, keep the same service, and increase the safety. So last thing we want is to transmit it from person to person. So we've leveraged technology. We have walk-up drive up, we have on-site, we have face-to-face, we have all different means to get you to have the vaccine, receive the vaccine safely. So we've also put a QR code. So instead of the traditional walk up to the clinic, grab a clipboard, grab a pen, sign it, everything is digital. Even the education component's digital. So we can minimize that risk of transmission. It's all about prevention. It's all about making sure that you don't get sick and that we help you get what you need to keep you healthy, keep you and your family healthy.
Why is it more important to get it during the COVID-19 pandemic?
If you think about it that way, meaning if you get flu and you get damage in the lungs for flu, you are more susceptible for other viruses, not just COVID alone, but all the other lung diseases.
There are tens of thousands of people in San Diego County who have previously tested positive for COVID-19. Should they be getting the vaccine?
Yes, absolutely, they should be. Now, there is an exception. When you have COVID, if you're active with COVID, that is an exception because we don't want you to transmit the virus to other people as well. We want to keep you safe. So after you're recovered from COVID, yes, absolutely, you should be one getting the vaccine. It's very important because we know COVID has some lasting effects in the lungs, so you don't want to damage your lungs further. You want to make sure you prevent from getting infections.
And that was KPBS health reporter Taryn Mento speaking with Kaiser's Dr. Seng. Doing your own COVID test at home with results coming in minutes could soon be a possibility. Currently, when people are tested for COVID, they get the swab and the nose tests and often have to wait days for results. Scripps research head Eric Topol says daily at-home tests, which use saliva samples, could tell people immediately if they need to quarantine. But he says the companies producing these tests need more funding, and FDA regulations still keep them from being widely distributed.
The government hasn't done anything to get behind these tests to fund them, to make production. You can't have a startup company that can't get FDA approval and then has to make hundreds of millions of tests.
Topol says these tests could cost around $1 each, though he says the government should make them free. The FDA declined to say how many applications they've received and confirmed that no at-home tests have been approved. Night 3 of the Republican National Convention will continue an appeal to women. Several prominent women in the party will take the stage before Mike Pence accepts the nomination for 4 more years as vice president. Nadia Romero has a preview.
Republicans are halfway through their 2020 National Convention, with last night's headliner, First Lady Melania Trump, appealing directly to suburban and female voters.
In my husband, you have a president who will not stop fighting for you and your families.
The First Lady's speech contrasting at times with the direct attacks delivered by some of the president's most outspoken supporters.
Joe says he'll build back better. Yeah, build the Bidens back better.
He's a career politician who's never signed the front of a check and does not know the slightest thing about the American worker or the American business.
The president also putting the powers of the presidency on full display, holding a naturalization ceremony and issuing a pardon.
I grant John, I'm not sure you know this, a full pardon.
Wednesday night, Vice President Mike Pence will accept the nomination and will make the case to re-elect the man who put him on the ticket. Second Lady Karen Pence will also speak.
This is the third night, and the theme tonight, as you said, is Land of Heroes. And America is made up of people who are heroes and everyday Americans. So you'll hear from some everyday Americans.
The vice president is also expected to continue the attacks on the Democratic nominee. Other big names on Wednesday include Senators Joni Ernst and Marsha Blackburn and South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. And more appearances from the man at the top of the ticket, President Trump, are expected. In Washington, I'm Nadia Romero.
We are carrying the PBS NewsHour coverage of the Republican National Convention on K1 KPBS through tomorrow. La Mesa residents that are having a hard time meeting their rental payments have another avenue to get help. The city is offering up to 3 months of rental assistance through HomeSmart, and that includes any past due rent. The maximum assistance is $5,000. To be eligible, residents must live within the La Mesa city limits and have a total household income below the limits that are posted on the website home-start.org. San Diego is making it easier to add granny flats and tiny homes to people's backyards. The goal? Increase affordable housing. But as iNewsSource investigative reporter Cody Delaney found, many get turned into short-term vacation rentals.
City officials told iNewsSource they're investigating about 30 people who may have illegally turned their granny flat into a short-term vacation rental. San Diego gives financial breaks to get granny flats built. This month, the City Council voted to also give breaks to people who add tiny homes on wheels to backyards. Neither are supposed to become Airbnb rentals, but John Thixton with Save San Diego Neighborhoods says that's what will happen.
They can make 2 or 3 times as much money renting it out as a short-term vacation rental. That's what they're going to do.
It will be up to Mayor Kevin Faulconer and his staff to find those violators and enforce the law. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource investigative reporter Cody Delaney.
iNewsSource is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. And here's a quick recap of our top story. Today, San Diego County laid out guidelines for when all schools will be allowed to reopen next week. As for the latest coronavirus numbers, the county reported 3 more deaths and 287 new cases, and we are still below that case rate of 100 per 100,000 threshold for reopening. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Maya Trabulsi. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, proud to support the mission of KPBS and privileged to serve San Diego clients. Anderson Plumbing, Heating and Air, helping homeowners maintain drain, heating, and cooling systems since 1978. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.